Hello, Year 7. I hope that you're all well and you've had a lovely weekend. I hope you're enjoying our class reader, which is The Tales of King Arthur. We're going to try and briefly recap Chapter 3, and then we are going to move on to Chapter 4 today. So we started off the chapter with Lancelot being made a knight. It's kind of around the time that Arthur and Guinevere are due to get married, and King Arthur's gifted the Round Table instead of a dowry, which is interesting, and he works on bringing knights together for that. Lancelot is sent by King Ban, his father, to Arthur's court, and initially he's seen as a bit of a joke. He's all limbs, and then eventually all limbs, as in he's a bit clumsy and all over the place. He hasn't quite grown into himself yet. And then he shows his strength, and people start to like him a little bit more. He then goes to try to there's a knight called Sir Caradoc who is upsetting a lot of people and doing lots of bad things. So he goes to try and ask him to come to Arthur's court initially. So Caradoc refuses. So Lancelot stays there, waits until he's asleep, and then captures him and brings him back. And then he asks King Arthur if he can fight Sir Caradoc, and he eventually defeats him. Arthur and Guinevere marry, and they have lots of feasting and games. And then eventually Lancelot starts to think, well, I'd like to go on some adventures on my own. So he has been off wandering for a few days with his horse, and he falls asleep under a tree. And along come 4 ladies. So the Lady of the Marshes, the Lady of the Outdials, the Queen of Northgales, and Queen Morgan Le Fay. And they have various reasons for not liking him, particularly the Lady of the Marshes, who is the sister of Sir Caradoc that he has slain. So they capture him. Morgan Le Fay puts a spell on him which sends him to sleep, and they trap him in a tower. And there they plan to torture him until he dies. So what they do is, so this tower is surrounded by marshes, and she sends some creatures called the Coranians. And if you'll remember, I asked you to draw an image of them torturing him in the tower. So they had these creepy bright blue eyes, and they were stabbing him and torturing him all night. The next morning at dawn, they leave him, and a maid comes in and asks for Lancelot to help her, and that she'll free him in return. And she says that her father, Sir Darrell, was a knight, and he has been captured by Sir Turquine, who is Sir Caradoc's brother. So it's not a very nice family, clearly. And she asks for help to release her father, says that she's the daughter of a knight, and she's been made to be a scullery maid. So she gives him his armor, and he goes off and finds Sir Turquine, and they fight for 2 hours, and Lancelot eventually slays him. Then he finds a dog and follows it to some ruins, which turns out to be the Chapel Perilous, and he is there. Follows the dog to the ruins, and he finds a lady with an injured knight, I think, not dead, and asks for help to avenge him and to save him. So he has to go to the Chapel Perilous to find this sword and a shroud to help heal her injured husband. So he travels to Chapel Perilous. When he gets to the door, there are 30 knights that besiege him immediately, and he shouts at them to go away, and he notices then that they're actually dead men. He takes the sword and the shroud, and the whole time he's being chased by these dead soldiers. But eventually he comes out of the castle, and he comes along comes upon Merlin, and Merlin tells him that the lady with the injured man that he was led to, that they were all evil tricks by the 4 queens who were unhappy with him for killing Sir Caradoc, and actually that that he didn't need to do anymore. So eventually, at the end of the story, he's made a Knight of the Round Table. And the last few events of the story were a trick on the part of the queens, which is interesting. So we're going to move on now to chapter 4. I'm going to share my page with you. If you bear with me a second, I'll put the VLE on. So chapter 4 is called The Knight of the Kitchen, and as always, you can read along with me, or you can just listen. That's up to you. But I would like you, once I stop reading after 20 minutes, I would like you then to read to the end of the chapter, and then there'll be some tasks on Satchel 1 and Google Classroom for you to complete. So let's get cracking with the story. So, the Knight of the Kitchen. It was the Feast of Pentecost, and King Arthur was holding his court of the Round Table at the city of Cancanadan, hard by the sea in Wales. In the high hall the tables were set for dinner, and the floor was freshly strewn with rushes, flowers, and fennel, so that the place smelled as sweet as a field. The cook and his scullions came to and fro through the door of the kitchen with anxious faces, for they feared lest the meat should be overdone. But as yet King Arthur would not sit to dinner, for it was his custom never to go to meat on that day until he had heard or seen some great marvel or adventure. Sir Gawain stood looking from a window in the bower where the king sat with the queen, and suddenly he turned with a laugh and said, "Sir, go to your meat, for here, I think, cometh a strange adventure." And even as the king took his seat on the high day in the hall, and his knights sat at the round table, through the great door of the hall came 2 men, well beseen and richly dressed, and leaning on their shoulders was a tall, fair young man, as goodly to strength and breadth as ever was seen. That means he was a very good size, very strong, very wide shoulders, with hands large and fair. But he was either lazy or ill-conditioned, for he leaned upon his fellows as if he were unable to stand upright. And the 3 of them marched through the hall, speaking no word, and they came to the foot of the day, while men sat silent and marvelling. Then the young man raised himself upright, and it was seen that he was 1.5 feet taller than those beside him. "God bless you, O king," said the young man, and all your fair fellowship, and in especial the fellowship of the Round Table. I come to crave of your kindness 3 gifts, and they are such as ye may worshipfully and honourably grant unto me. And the first I will ask now, and the others I will ask at the same day 12 months, wheresoever ye hold your feast of Pentecost. Ask, said the king, and ye shall be granted your petition. The first is this, said he, that ye give me meat and drink and lodging here for a year. Willingly, said the king, but what is your name, and whence come you? Ye have the bearing of good lineage. That is as may be, was the reply, but I may tell you naught, if it please you, lord. Then King Arthur called Sir Kay, his steward, and bade him tend the young man for a year, as if he were a lord's son. There is no need that he should have such care, sneered Sir Kay, who was a man of a sour mind. I dare swear that he is but a villain born. If he were of good blood, he would have craved a horse and harness, and since he hath no name, I will dub him Beaumains or Fair Hands, for see how soft are his hands, and he shall live in the kitchen and become as fat as any pig. But Sir Lancelot and Sir Gawain reproached Sir Kay for his mocking of the young man. For, said Sir Lancelot, I dare lay my head, he hath the making of a man of great worship. That cannot be, said Sir Kay. He has asked, as his nature prompted him. He will make naught but fat, for he desires only meat and drink. On my life I would swear he is only some lazy fellow from an abbey, where food hath failed, so he has come hither for sustenance. So Kay sat down to his meat, laughing, and Beaumains went to the door of the hall, where the varlets and boys ate the leavings from the table. But he fared badly there, for they jeered at him as Sir Kay had done. Afterwards Sir Launcelot, of his great gentleness and courtesy, bade him come to his chamber to be better fed and clothed. And Sir Gawain, because of a liking he felt in his heart for the young man, proffered him good meat and drink and a soft bed. But then at all other times Beaumains refused, and would do nothing but what Sir Kay commanded. Thus he lived in the kitchen, eating broken scraps, and lying at night where the scullions lay, except that he was given the chilliest spot furthest from the fire. But he did what he was bidden to do with a cheerful air, and was ever willing to work. And if there was any jousting of knights or any other sights of prowess, these would he see with the greatest delight. In any sports or trials of strength or skill among the serving men, he was ever foremost, and none could overcome him in wrestling or at quarterstaff, nor could any throw the bar or cast a stone so far as he could, no, not by 2 yards. So he's obviously a very strong and good sportsman. Whenever Sir Kay met him about the hall or the kitchen, he would laugh mockingly, and to those about him he would say, "Well, how like you my huge boy of the kitchen?" But to such sneers, and to all the scorns and insults of the varlets of the kitchen, Beaumains would answer naught, and was ever quiet and mild whatever he endured. And to all he was ever gentle, both man and child, and he never put forth his great strength in anger. Thus a year passed, until again it was the feast of Pentecost, and at that time the king held it at his chief city in Wales, Caerleon upon Usk. And again the feast was royally prepared in the great hall of the court. But the king would not give the signal to sit to meat until he should have heard or seen some strange adventure. But about noon a squire came to where the king waited, and said, "Lord, I am bidden to say ye may go for your meat, for there cometh a damsel with some strange adventure." Quickly the king sat on the high seat, and the cooks brought in the smoking collops of meat and the dishes of savoury stews. And as they began to eat, there came a maiden of plain, sharp visage, who made her way to the step of the dais, and there, kneeling, cried, "Succour and help I crave of you, O king." "For whom?" said the king, "and for what reason?" "Sir," said the maiden, "my lady sister is of great beauty and renown, and is besieged in her castle by a tyrant knight who will not let her go forth from her castle. And because it is said that here in your court are the noblest knights in all the world, I come to you praying for aid." "What is your lady sister's name?" asked the king, "and where doth she dwell? And tell me who is he that doth besiege her?" "Sir King," said the lady, "I may not tell you my sister's name, but she is of great beauty and of wide lands, and the tyrant knight who besieges her is the Red Knights of the Reedlands." "I know him not," replied the king. "Sir," cried Sir Gawain from his seat, "I know him well. He is one of the perilous knights of the world, for he hath the strength of 7 men, and from him I once escaped barely with my life." "Fair lady," said the king, "I would help you willingly, but as ye will not tell me your lady's name, none of my knights here shall go with you with my consent." The damsel looked about the hall with a quick angry glance, and the knights that sat there liked not her sour looks. Then from the crowd of scullions and kitchen maids that hung about the serving tables at the top of the hall came Beaumains, his dress smirched, but his handsome face lit up, and his eyes burning with eagerness. "Sir King," he cried, holding up his hand, a boon I crave." As he came to the step of the dais, the damsel shrank from him, as if he had been something foul. "Say on," replied the king to the young man. "God thank you, my king," went on Beaumains. "I have been these 12 months in your kitchen, and have had my full living, as ye did graciously order, and now I ask for the 2 further gifts ye promised." "Ye have but to ask," replied the king. "Sir, they are these," said Beaumains. "First, that you will grant me this adventure of the damsel." "I grant it you," said King Arthur. "Then, sir, this is the other, that ye shall bid Sir Launcelot du Lake to follow me, and to make me a knight when I shall desire him." "All this shall be done if Sir Launcelot think it well," said the king. But the lady was exceedingly wroth, and her eyes flashed with scorn as she turned to the king. "Shame on thee," she cried. "Will you give me a kitchen scullion to aid me?" With that she hastened from the hall, mounted her horse, and rode away. Even as she went forth, a dwarf in the dress of a page entered the hall, leading a great horse richly caparisoned, and on the saddle was piled a splendid suit of armour. And the dwarf went up to Beaumains and began to arm him, while men asked each other whence came all this fine gear. When he was dressed in armour, all the knights marvelled to see how goodly a man he looked. Then Beaumains took leave of King Arthur and of Sir Gawain, and asked Sir Lancelot to follow him. Many people went to the door of the hall to see Beaumains mount his horse and ride after the damsel, and the way he sat on his steed with its trappings of gold and purple excited in their admiration, but all wondered to see that Beaumains had neither shield nor spear, and some laughed and said, "The ignorant churl, doth he think the mere sight of him on horseback will affright his enemies, that he carries neither shield nor lance?" Sir Kay sneered with them, and suddenly getting up from his seat, he cried, "By my faith, I will go after my kitchen boy, and see whether he will still know me for his better." "Ye had better bide at home," said Sir Lancelot, and Sir Gawain agreed. But Sir Kay laughed them aside, and having swiftly put on his armour, he took his spear and shield and rode after Beaumains. He caught up with the youth just as the latter reached the side of the damsel, and Sir Kay cried out with a scornful laugh, "What, Beaumains, do you not know me?" "Ay," replied Beaumains, "I know ye for the most ungentle knight in all King Arthur's court, and therefore keep you off from me." "Ah, churl," cried Sir Kay, "thou needst a lesson from me. A beggar though he will be on horseback, is still a beggar." With that he put his lance in rest and dashed towards Beaumains, expecting an easy victory. But the young man, putting the lance aside with his sword, just as it was about to strike him, rushed upon Sir Kay, and with a deft thrust struck him through a joint of his armour, so that Sir Kay fell backwards off his horse to the ground. Swiftly leaping down, Beaumains took possession of his opponent's spear and shield, and commanded his dwarf to mount upon Sir Kay's horse. Then, after remounting, Beaumains rejoined the damsel, who had seen all that had taken place, but said nothing. At that moment they saw Sir Lancelot coming towards him. He had seen Sir Kay's discomfiture, and wondered at the mastery which Beaumains had shown. "Fair sir," cried Beaumains, turning and drawing rein as Sir Lancelot approached, "I would joust with you, if ye will." Right, year 7, I would like you to carry on reading then from there until the end of the chapter, and then there will be a task and some questions for you to answer on Satchel 1 and Google Classroom. Thank you very much. Have a good day.